co-host of Dinner and a Movie on TBS, and a regular commentator on NPR. Her many acting credits include the movies Daddy Daycare and The Shaggy Dog. TV shows include Seinfeld, Dexter, and Better Things. She is a lung cancer and breast cancer survivor and an activist who speaks at conferences across the globe. And tonight she'll be sharing a story from her next book, The End of My Life is Killing Me, The Unexpected Joys of a Cancer Slacker, which comes out on March 17th, 2026. So look for that. Please join me in giving a warm above and beyond welcome to Annabelle Gurwitch.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. This night is so much fun. It has everything I love. Hugging, jumping out of planes, which I will never do, but I love people doing it. And I know when I walked into this room that I would be with my people for even just a minimum of 3 reasons. One, I am in a room full of people who understand the superiority of Thelma's cookies. I spent some time in Des Moines a few years back, and in my last book, which is titled You're Leaving When, I memorialized my love of Thelma's snickerdoodles. I mean, I never got over it. So I really came just for the Thelmas, but I'm happy to be here too. I also know that I'm with my people because all of us in this room have been touched by cancer. And thirdly, we share a value that not everyone has enjoyed yet, which is the idea of a transformative journey. And that is a story I want to tell you tonight, which comes from my new book that comes out next year, The End of My Life is Killing Me. Before I do that, I want to say one thing, though. I love a reminder, and I'm always reminding people of what the word survivor means, that we survive from the moment we are diagnosed. This is our survival, and we can claim that title. I have another way I like to identify, which is as a cancer slacker. What do I mean by that? Well, it is my goal, and I'm devoting my time. It's also my desire and wish that as the science progresses and the research progresses, we can all be cancer slackers, meaning that we can all have the goal of having to do as little as possible to survive our cancer, and as much as possible spending our time to be enjoying our life and having adventures. So perhaps one day we will all go from cancer warriors to cancer slackers. So this is a story that I'm calling a sex, drugs, and rock and roll story. Only the drugs are cancer drugs. And I want to show you a picture. You see a picture of me, how I appear mostly in life. But for 1 week, this was my life. Now, how does that happen that I would go from being a mom, a 60-year-old woman living in Los Angeles that I flew from, I did not cycle from, as you mentioned, Rob. But how does this happen to a person? Cancer. And here's how it started. It was 11 o'clock the night before I was scheduled to take a 7:30 flight from Los Angeles to Heathrow Airport. I hadn't begun packing. I had no idea exactly where I was going, what I would be doing. But a couple months earlier, over a bottle of mid-price Merlot, a man that I had been seeing for less than a handful of dates had asked me if I wanted to join him on a European jaunt, a whirlwind trip. We would go to London and Prague and Amsterdam and the countryside in Netherlands and Paris. Now, I hadn't been to Paris in 2 decades, and I had this fantasy at that moment. I wanted to stroll down cobblestone streets. I wanted to go to Café du Magot and chug back espresso like Hemingway and Picasso. And later that night, Jeremy, my new guy, and I, we would stroll this cobblestone streets of a little arrondissement and go upstairs to our little hotel, our attic room, and the attic room would have an iron bed frame, and we would have an X-rated little tete-a-tete with a view of the chimney tops of the left bank. Somehow, this fantasy mirrored every production of La Boheme ever staged, only with a better ending for me than Mimi with TB and with hot water and high thread count sheets. Only, as we drained the last bits of this bottle of wine, he said, the thing is, we're not going to be going alone. We would be tagging along with a fledgling heavy metal band that he managed. You see, they were on their first European tour, and to save them money, he had offered to drive the van, and I could come if I would sell their merch. A van tour around Europe selling merch? Wasn't this the dream of every 20-year-old or a 60-year-old who had not long ago been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer? It had been 18 months since I had met my first oncologist, who was my oncologist, and I had gotten a call that had changed my life. My child had just graduated from college, had come home to Los Angeles, and this was during COVID. We were in a lockdown, and we wanted to do everything right. This was at a time when people were shopping in grocery stores and hazmat suits and microwaving their mail, and you couldn't get a COVID test, which is how we ended up in an urgent care in a sleepy little suburb just north of Los Angeles. It was a dinky little place. It was sandwiched between an Olive Garden and a cheesecake factory. We go in to get this COVID test, and they ask if we have any symptoms, and I say, well, no, not really, but I have a little cough. It's not a big deal. And the doctor says, you should have an X-ray. Now, he had a nice tousle of hair and twinkly eyes, and I was sure this was a cosmetic sell, counter, upsell kind of thing. You know, you go into the store, you want to buy mascara, and you walk out with a pricey moisturizer. You know, this is like the urgent care equivalent. Who gets an X-ray at an urgent care unless you've broken a limb? But, you know, there was that tousle of hair, the twinkly eyes, and I thought, maybe he has a thing for older women. I think I'll do the X-ray. So do the X-ray, and he comes back in the room 15 minutes later. He says, oh, you're fine, go on your way. And I'm almost a little disappointed. So then, on our way home, we are driving through this mountain pass when the front bumper on my Prius falls off. Now, it was the pandemic, it had been loose, and I had jerry-rigged it into place with some tape, and now it had taken out a tire. We're at the side of the road, and the phone rings. And it's not AAA, who I had called, and I'm with my kid, and on the phone, on the speakerphone, is the doctor from the urgent care. And he says, are you alone? Well, right? So I am sure he's about to ask me out. I throw my son a look like, yeah, Mom still got it. when he says, "I'm so sorry, I read the wrong results. You have a concerning mass on your right lung." Well, everybody in this room, you know what happens next. I am ping-ponging around Los Angeles, getting all the kind of scans. They are, it's like Baskin-Robbins ice cream. I had the scans with the IVs. I had the scans where you drink the clear liquid, the scans where you drink the sludgy liquid, the scan that makes you feel like you have to pee, the scan that sounds like a bad club mix. All the scans as my pulmonologist and I try to figure out that I have anything except lung cancer. Now, I got really excited about the idea that I might have something called valley fever. Valley fever is this kind of dust spore that gets in your lungs in the San Fernando Valley. And I was just sure I had valley fever because it sounded like something Moon Unit Zappa sang about. In the 1980s, it sounded kind of sexy and kind of festive, and I thought, I'm going to walk around and say, I have valley fever. But that's not what happened. It was on a telehealth call in my home that I'd gotten dressed up for. Now, I'm just curious, of all of you, am I the only one that gets dressed up for doctor's appointments? I do it because it's like what Sally Field said in her Oscar speech. I want them really to really like me. But on that call, that was when I got the news, stage 4 lung cancer that had metastasized to both of my lungs. It had gone citrus, is what I was told. And all of us know, citrus, not good. This is the bad thing. So, over the next few months, I got some good news, though. And the good news was that I had tested positive for having a mutation that was treatable with biomarker-targeted drugs, the drugs that turn off one gene that is driving the cancer. At that point in my life, and I'm sure you all know this moment, it was like all of my life skills had raptured. I was getting lost on the way to the grocery store. I was speaking too slowly, like a record playing at the wrong speed. I couldn't write. I couldn't hold on to a thought. I was holding onto walls because I was sure that my legs were going to collapse underneath me. But I was fortunate enough to respond to these drugs, and after changing the dosage, because at the very beginning of my treatment, I had terrible toxicities. There were some weeks when I never left the bathroom. And then there was a day that I just collapsed on the side of the street. I was on my daily walk. I was 2 blocks from my home, and I crumpled like a wet potato chip. And I was lying there on the grassy meridian thinking, well, I guess I live here now. I love grassy meridians. I never pass a grassy meridian now without being so grateful. I was so fatigued at that time that I crawled home on the sidewalk. And because I live in Los Angeles, no one stopped. Not a single person stopped. I imagine the conversations that were being had later that night at home. Women in Los Angeles will do anything as a new fitness routine. I bet the woman I saw crawling on the sidewalk was doing some sort of Kim Kardashian butt lift. Well, after a couple months, side effects had subsided, and I would have them sometimes, but I had this sense of fleeting invincibility, and it was at that moment I decided to hit the ground running and carpe every diem. I was having bread and butter with every meal. After years of being an actress, bread hadn't passed my lips for 20 years. When my fingerprints faded, which is an uncommon side effect of the medication I was on, I called everyone I knew and I said, do you need to have someone murdered? You know, if it's for a really good reason. The next time I went in for a scan at my hospital, I noticed there was this beautiful drawing in the basement going unnoticed, unloved by anyone. I tested the fastenings. I figured, what's the worst that can happen if I get arrested for art theft? A life sentence? I also decided maybe I should try my hand at love. But then I thought, okay, who is going to want to get involved with someone who has a prognosis that has a poor outcome? And then I thought, someone with commitment issues. Naturally, I tried online dating. I went online and I thought, maybe I could date someone who also has cancer. And I found a site that said cancer dating, that said they matched cancers by their location. There were 890 cancers within 5 miles of me. It took me about 5 minutes to realize it was Cancer, the astrological sign. But then I figured, maybe some of those cancers have cancer. As luck would have it, I reconnected in real life with an old crush. And this is how I ended up at that dinner. We had been dating for a few months. Jeremy and I, he had moved to my neighborhood. I had gotten a divorce during COVID. He had gotten separated during COVID. And I threw myself into what could only be called a lust affair with all of that carpe diem energy. I went to see my gynecologist who said, Annabelle, you've got to stop having so much sex. I guess I was 1 month into this affair and had shown up with my second UTI. As it turned out, the medication dries your skin out externally, which also means it dries it out internally as well. But I said, cancer is my bad boyfriend. I'm cheating on him with joy. And I took probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, anything with biotic in its name. Cut to this dinner. Now, I said yes to this trip really because I thought it was never going to happen. But here it was. It was the night before, and I'm staring at an empty suitcase. Jeremy and the band were already in Europe, and I thought about not going, but I thought about something my doctor had said to me. He had said earlier that day when I had had my cancerversary, now is the time to drink the fine wine. And I started packing. Okay, so how was I going to pack for this trip? I came up with a set of goals. I was going to keep the romance going. I was going to sell their merch. I was going to try not to die. Now, I had been upfront about my diagnosis and prognosis, and my intention hadn't been dishonesty, but having seen the toll that my health had taken on my family and friends, and I wanted to remain in the fog of romance for as long as possible. So maybe I hadn't told Jeremy all of the effects of the medication. I looked at the band's Instagram page. There was a picture of the band in a van somewhere on tour in America. The lead singer had his shorts dangling around his ankles. He was gripping a plastic water bottle. The caption read, "This will have to do because there's no place to stop and pee." Okay, I didn't want to have to risk having them pull over and find bathrooms every 5 minutes when they were on a tour that they hoped would change their life. Now, I could forego having sex, but that didn't seem very rock and roll. So I packed as much UTI medication as I could find. I packed a boatload of Imodium because things could still be unpredictable. And then, along with being cancer-y, I was a menopausal woman, so I had to pack my hormone replacements, my estrogen patches, my thyroid, my progesterone, and an antidepressant, because you know who needs an antidepressant? Someone who has stage 4 cancer. I started to put them together in a weekly pill pack, you know, the Monday through Friday packs, and I thought, oh my God, nothing screams I'm infirm more than one of these pill packs. This is going to really surprise Jeremy when he realizes the colossal amount of maintenance involved in my carefully cultivated, unimpacted by cancer lifestyle. So I started packing all the meds in little jewelry pouches. I put some in my suitcase. I put some in my purse. I put some in my jeans pockets in case the plane went down. And then, because I might need to quarantine in Europe, I took 2 months' worth of my medication, which you can't get on the open market. I got Paxlovid, and then I threw in more lube than you could possibly imagine one couple would need. And then I put in medical, this is what I call packing while cancer, like driving while intoxicated. And then I put in the medical grade moisturizer I needed to keep my skin from cracking. And then, because I didn't want to turn the band's van into an elder transport vehicle, I threw in some scented lotions, and then I had no room for clothes. It was 2:30 in the morning when I threw in one outfit, and I prayed a secular prayer that we wouldn't get stopped by any border police, because between the lingerie, the lubes, and the pills, I had the suitcase of a sex trafficker. Now, when I landed in Heathrow, Jeremy came to pick me up, and I get my first look at the van. He opens the door gallantly, and he says, "Welcome to your home away from home." And as if on cue, a crumpled up bag of potato chips falls out along with a beer bottle, and I am hit with the scent of dirty socks. Now, I'm assuming we're about to go to London, but no. This is when I learned that our job for the first day is not to go to London, but it's to pick up snacks for the band. So there'd be no time to go to London. And then I learned that in order to save money, we wouldn't be staying in London. To save money, we would be staying at a schoolmate's place far in the country, hours away from the city, and that we were due at Jeremy's high school reunion. Clearly, I hadn't gotten the details of what I thought was going to be my bucket list straight here. So we arrive at this quaint village, which we don't get to see because numerous pals and cousins of Jeremy's have already arrived, and a bunch of them were staying over, and we would all be sharing one bathroom. The band was also there because they had stayed out late from the show, and they were skulking in the corner. No one said a word to me. Now, I knew nothing about the band, and I really knew nothing about heavy metal. The only thing I knew was that the CIA uses the song Enter Sandman to torture prisoners. I had listened to one of their songs on the internet, and it was a throbbing assault to the nervous system. But I had been told the only money the band was going to see was the money from the merch. So no pressure. I was ready to do it. Now, they all looked vaguely disgruntled, which seemed to be very rock and roll, except for the guitarist, who had a thick mane of ginger hair, and he had these big letters tattooed on his arm that said, "Let It Rattle," and he looked exactly like the assassin Tormund Giantsbane from Game of Thrones. I was just terrified of him. Now, at dinner that night, I learned that in order to save money, we were going to have group meals, and he had prepared for us a 4-cheese lasagna. Clearly, they had never met anyone Jewish. We had been dating for such a little amount of time that I also hadn't mentioned that the drug I was on exasperated a natural tendency towards gassiness. As a flatulence prophylactic, I had gone cold turkey on dairy, but I had often excused myself, rushing into the bathroom, turning on the fan, the heater, running water, sometimes singing to muffle the sound. We had also started out our relationship by taking walks, constitutionals, and often I would lag behind, feigning an untied shoelace, waiting, and he was just out of range, for the wind was just right to unburden myself in the night air. All of this carefully cultivated mystery could immediately vanish. I decided that in order to be the easygoing version of myself that doesn't exist, I would eat only bread on the trip for the good of the group. Now, the next days were just a blur of logistics, dropping off the band, picking them up at the airport. I learned I wouldn't be going to Prague because we were tasked to get the van over to Europe across the channel on an overnight ferry. We get in line for this ferry in Harwich, a very scenic town, which is the site of where the Mayflower took off, but we wouldn't see it because we were in line for the ferry, which turned out to be a lorry driver's ferry. It was us, truckers, and gangs of bikers. Well, that night on the ferry, bikers and truckers are double-fisting beers. It was run like a prison colony, basically. Lights out at 10 o'clock, 5:30 wake up to disembark. We get off in Holland, and now I'm excited because we are on our way to Amsterdam. Only I find out that in order to save money, we won't be staying in Amsterdam. We're going to be staying in an office park outside of Amsterdam, which was perfectly nice, but it was kind of like finding out you're going to spend the night in your accountant's office. We got up early the next morning. We were due to pick up the band at the airport, and I thought, I know, I will win them over like any mother does with food. I pick up some warm croissants, and we meet them at the airport. And I smile, and I hand them this bag of warm pastries. We're all on diet. Thorbun, Giant's Mane, tells me. They grab them from me. They sit in the van as an uncomfortable silence overtakes us. No one had made eye contact with me yet. As the least essential person in the crew and the smallest, I was assigned to sit on the hump in the front row of the van, sandwiched between Jeremy, who was driving, and the lead singer. Something I learned is called riding bitch. Now, I want to be useful, so I appoint myself in charge of directions, and I'm also doing their phone charging, and now we are on our way to the biggest gig they are going to have in Europe, the Pink Pop Festival. This is going to take place in this countryside in the Netherlands, where apparently there are torrential rains, so it's called a mud festival. I'm asked by Jeremy if I'm okay in staying in a tent with a porta potty. I had been Googling local spas. So instead, we find accommodations in Belgium. And amazingly, we are going to be staying at a 200-year-old farmhouse that has a Michelin-starred restaurant. Only, that's when the drummer says, you know what we should do? We should be tripping at the festival. So then we have to take a 2-hour detour to a place that sells shrooms. That's legal in Holland, as is almost everything you can possibly imagine. We end up arriving at the farmhouse at midnight, missing the meal. Our host says, "You've missed the meal, but we can offer you bread." Bread. What a treat. I've only had bread the entire time since I've landed in Europe. The next morning, we wake up and we're on our way to the festival, and the guys are nervous. Imagine Dragons are on the bill. Green Day is playing. It's going to be their biggest show in their lives. We get there and check in, and the man at the gate says, "You're stage 5." And for a moment, I think he means stage 5 cancer. And I think, oh, that's not good. But it turns out we're playing at stage 5, which is the smallest stage at the festival. It starts to rain. We have to walk miles. I think, oh my God, I guess this is that transformative journey I signed up for. But no, it doesn't end there. We get to stage 5, and it is completely empty. This is a stadium that is meant for thousands of people. And there is one lone person waiting for this fledgling heavy metal band. And I think, oh my God, they haven't spoken to me. They haven't made eye contact. I don't think they know my name. What's going to happen if they bomb here? Well, as they start to set up, Jeremy sees this one lone superfan sitting out, crisscross applesauce in the audience. He takes off his band shirt, and in the most sexy thing I have ever seen a senior citizen do, he swings it over his head, throws it to the fan. The band gets ready to go out. There's now maybe 50 people in this sea of grass. It's just so empty. So I stand there right where they can see me in case they want to actively ignore someone. They head out, and I'm praying they do well. Well, as they start to play, suddenly they seem taller on stage. All that disgruntledness, it looks actually really rock and roll. And throngs of people start to arrive. Thousands of people are pouring into the stadium. We learn later that what had happened was the backstage crew had been so won over by Jeremy's gesture of generosity. They had called up the DJs on the other stages and said, "Hey, get over here. Send people, call out in your stages. Send people over to see this band." By the time they finish playing, I'm jumping up and down. Jeremy and I, it's like we're at our kids' bar mitzvah. They are 10,000 people there. They are deemed the breakout hit of the festival, and I am now their #1 fan. Which is fantastic, but also a tremendous responsibility, because now, after the show, we are on our way to our big destination, our last place where I'm going to sell merch, Paris. I had been writing bitch for 7 hours when we arrive in the City of Lights. Now, Paris is known for its beautiful grand boulevards and its gorgeous limestone facades, but this is not where we are. No, for some reason, we are in a dimly lit arrondissement, and we are heading towards this concrete block where there's a broken neon that's flashing the word hotel. I think it might have been hotel, but maybe the H is silent in French. I'm not sure. We walk in, and the lobby has all the Gaelic charm of an Embassy Suites. We get to our room, and we're even more confused. We open the fire door, and there are 2 doors in front of us. Neither look promising. In one door, there's a bathroom which is decorated solely in brown, which no one wants in a bathroom except maybe a bear. Then we enter the room, which is painted a sad beige. There's a Mr. Coffee pot on the desk. A Mr. Coffee in the city of cafes? Not only that, it is the saddest bed I have ever seen. The sheets sagging like loose skin over the bed frame, the pillows defeated, the mattress moribund with no give. I thud as I lie down on the mattress. Then I bend over to take my shoes off, and I notice there's a small mound of toenail clippings and bleach stains. What terrible thing has happened in this hotel? Oh my God, I said. This is the kind of place where you wake up in the bathroom without a kidney in an ice bath. I turned to look towards Jeremy, who has placed a bottle of lube by the bed. He's British, a stoic and an optimist. And I said, "Are you fucking kidding me? Taking my pants off? No, I'm not even taking my shoes off here." And he goes into the bathroom to brush his teeth, and I do not, because I am pretending I'm not here. This cannot be our romantic stay in Paris. And that is the moment where I have my transformative journey. I thought the transformative journey was making the trip over. I thought the transformative journey might be walking in the rain. I thought the transformative journey might have been falling in love with the band. But no, in that moment, I have a choice. I could leave, which would be perfectly reasonable and maybe hygienic and medically indicated. I could leave the hotel and go stay somewhere else, or I could stay. Now, I've always said, I hate that phrase, cancer can be a teacher. Anything cancer has to teach me, I want to learn some other way. But in that moment, I think, Jeremy has been so good to this band. He is working so hard. This band is trying so hard. If I leave, it will be disruptive to them. The generous thing to do, the thing I don't want to do, the transformative thing to do, would be to stay. He comes back from the bathroom, and I say, "Don't worry, it's not that bad. I'm staying, still no fucking happening." And I stay that night, and I wake up in the morning charged with the power that I am going to be the best merch girl ever. We get to the club, I set up my merch, I have a whole system going. I've slung the t-shirts over these cardboard boxes. I am going to do right by these guys. I've set it up in a place by the bar where there seems to be a lot of light. Then all of a sudden, the lights go out, the band takes the stage, and oh shit, I can't see anything. Now people are coming to buy my merch. I can't see the sizes. I'm selling them the wrong sizes. I'm throwing the sizes back. Sweat is pouring down my back. I'm trying to do my best merch girl ever job. When there's 2 songs left and I still have merch, and I pull out the ace that I've been holding in the back pocket to sell these shirts, I start telling the people at the concert that I am the guitarist's mother. And it works. I sell all the shirts. It wasn't the biggest sale. It wasn't the worst sale. I was a good enough merch girl. And later that day, the next day when I woke up, this was going to be my chance to have that sightseeing in Paris. And again, I faced a choice. Was I going to try to cram everything in that I wanted to see? And in that moment, I made another decision. And that decision was to chuck my plans, even though it could be the last day, the last time, the last Paris I would ever have. I decided to wander. I did no touristy things. I went to no museums. Now, what I did might have been illegal, to be in Paris and not do those things. But I had an ordinary day, which I believe is the most precious thing that can happen to someone living with cancer. And I realized on that day the gift that the band had given me. I had sold $1,400 worth of their merch, and they had given me the gift of indifference. For 1 week, I hadn't been cancer mom, like my son had started calling me. I was band mom. And I had not ever had to say to them, hey, while we're on tour, don't talk to me about cancer, something that had dominated every moment of my thought for the last 18 months. I didn't have to tell them that because they were 27 heavy metal band musicians and on a tour they hoped would change their life. And as the sun started to set, I was by myself at a cafe when the waiter told me I needed to vacate my table. And I thought, okay, here it comes, that patented French indifference. But no, what had happened was I had lost track of the days. It was actually the summer solstice, the Fête de la Musique, the day when all of Paris turns into a big party. I had had an ordinary day, but nobody puts Paris in a corner. Suddenly, there was music happening on every corner, and the beat started thrumming through my body, and I went from one corner to the next, listening to the music, and then suddenly the revelers poured out into the street, and I was dancing with them. I was on the cobblestone streets of Paris on the summer solstice, on what may be my last time ever in Paris. And the moon was in the sky, and the air was thick with sweat and champagne. And I was dancing on the streets of Paris. And that's my little story. I want to give you the epilogue, which is that even though I had that last day alone in Paris to myself, Jeremy and I are living together. And we are still walking, and I am still lagging behind him, hoping for the wind just right so I can unburden myself in the night air. That story will be in the book next year, and thank you so much for letting me share that story and letting me celebrate with you this amazing organization.